No matter how long you've been playing drums, if you want to take it to the next level, then you've come to the right place. There is a certain skill that makes really good drummers and distinguishes them from others. A skill that is often overlooked and that not only ensures that we can play much faster and more efficiently, but also more fluidly. If you feel like there's something holding you back in your technique, your timing, your groove, then this video is for you. I'm going to explain exactly what this skill is, what we need it for, and what exactly you should practice to improve your drumming in a short amount of time. And I will show you why the traditional rudiments are still relevant today, but why many use them incorrectly and do not exploit their potential at all. Let's get started right away. I have only one request. I'm passing on a lot of knowledge and experience to you here, something I actually do to earn my living as a drum teacher. So if this video helps you, please use the donation link in the description. Just think, if this was a lesson, how much would you be willing to pay for it? After all, you have the luxury of watching the video first and then deciding that. I upload it in the trust that everyone will give something back if it has helped them. This is the only way I can continue to keep up with this channel. Thank you very, very much for your honesty. The goal of any instrument is to play intuitively, without thinking about it, without hesitating. You can compare it to learning a language. At the beginning, you have to decipher each word individually, sometimes even every syllable, and that's how you speak. If you want to make the leap to fluent reading and speaking, you have to set exactly that as a goal and consciously practice it. To do this, you have to understand how the language is structured and practice the pronunciation. It's the same with an instrument. A beginner still has to concentrate on each note individually. That's how it sounds. Over time, you can play faster, but it often still sounds unsteady. And even if you are already very advanced, you should practice new things very slowly at first. But how do we do that without hearing it later? How do we make the leap to fluid playing? The key to do this is called chunking. This is a term from psychology that describes that we combine several pieces of information into one unit. We need that, otherwise you wouldn't be able to read this text fluently. The grouping into individual words with a clear meaning ensures that we see them as just a single unit and not letter by letter. When it comes to spoken language, we go one level higher and combine words into statements. We convey an idea and do not collect individual words or letters in our heads. That's exactly how we want to play drums, to create a groove, not to make individual strokes. And that is exactly the ability that distinguishes outstanding drummers. They transcend the level of individual beats and grasp and play rhythms as larger units. Unfortunately, however, this is often overlooked and therefore not practiced or taught. I too played for years until I discovered why my playing felt and sounded so bumpy. This skill can actually be learned in a targeted manner. To do this, we have to apply the idea of chunking to our timing and to our technique. With the right strategy, we can gain a flow for our playing. And it is precisely these three aspects that we will look at now. One thing is very important. I will now show you concrete exercises and concepts, but the goal is not that you necessarily do them exactly as I demonstrate them, but that you gain more flow for your playing, more self-confidence. So do the exercises at your tempo or apply the concepts to the techniques you want to learn. First, let's look at timing. There are two aspects to this. Precision, that is the correct placement of the beats on the rhythmic grid, for example the 16th notes. And consistency, the ability to keep a steady tempo. So this is more about the big picture. However, consistency is a skill in its own right and does not automatically arise from working on accuracy. So you can't just practice slowly and precisely and then just get faster with the same way of thinking and counting. There are different levels between which you switch back and forth, depending on the goal. With everything you are learning, you should start slowly in order to internalize the rhythm and coordination precisely. But once that's clear, you have to go to the next higher level, and that's where chunking comes in. If we want to play faster and more fluidly, we need to zoom out and think in larger units. So we focus on the pulse of the music or the metronome and let the notes pass in between. This is only possible if we group the individual beats into rhythmic building blocks. This becomes this. But if I now think in larger units, how can I make sure that the notes in between are precise? Well, in the same way that you can tell at a glance that this pattern is uniform and this is not. And in the same way you can hear that this rhythm is played cleanly and this one isn't. You just have to get into the habit of listening to yourself. Sounds banal, but many don't do that when practicing, but focus much more on the individual movements than on the overall sound. Trust your ears and the ability to recognize patterns and notice deviations. Of course, you have to know how it should sound. You can only reach a goal when you know its location. So when we practice slowly, we have to have an idea of what it sounds like when it is played faster. It should not feel like someone is alternatingly pressing the start and the stop button, but like someone has just turned down the speed. With this approach, it will be easier to play faster later and move to the level of the pulse. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is now about the overall impression and whether everything is coherent in terms of the basic beat. If not, focus again on your mental blueprint of how it should be, and the body usually automatically finds a way to solve it. After all, when you learn a new word, you don't think about how to move your lips and tongue, but concentrate on how it should sound. Your body does the rest automatically. So always keep the goal in mind. Often it's just a question of what to focus on. I recently had a student who only got up to about 90 BPM with his single strokes. We then did the following exercise, which you are welcome to try, as it reflects the basic principle. He should play a group of 4 16th notes and then a quarter note. This brought him already to 110. Then we played 2 groups of 16th notes and a half note. He should only focus on the beginning and the end and trust that the notes in between are clean. And with this approach, in the third step, we simply lined up these groups of 8 notes, these chunks. And already he got to 125. An increase of 35 beats within one lesson. A big part of that was focus, so no "I'll try it", but aim with all your attention for the goal of getting from the first to the 9th note. Forming larger units and counting slower. That's the paradoxical trick to playing faster. Focusing on the individual strokes interferes with our body implementing it and only causes us to stumble. I often see this in students who come to me to play faster with a double bass drum. There are a few tempos that are obstacles for many, and they seem relatively universal. For example, around 135, 140 or around 160 beats. Part of the problem is that you have to change the technique. But one aspect that is at least as important is that from a certain tempo you can no longer hear the beats individually or even in groups of 2, but also switch to another level in terms of perception. It is quite typical to orient oneself on the strong foot that plays the 8th notes, maybe even together with a strong hand. That gives you a convenient point of reference at the beginning, but even from a fairly low tempo onward, it would be too hectic to be geared to the 8th notes, and that doesn't sound fluent either. Not to mention simply wanting to play right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left faster and faster. you then get lost very quickly and feel uneven, no longer grounded. But the reason is that you're concentrating on the wrong thing. The pulse grounds us, not the rhythm. So as soon as the basic coordination is in place, you should use chunking again. For example, as a group of 4, just like in the exercise before. And then you just put these chunks one after the other and play quarter notes to it. This results in a clean flow of notes, and you'll always sound better if you calmly keep track of the bigger picture instead of jumping from stroke to stroke. So in the next step, enlarge the chunks and play 8 strokes to 1 stroke with your hands. The important thing is that you really feel and count in these large units and that you do it out loud. This is the only way to really step back and see the whole picture from the point of view of the beat. So practicing slowly is great for working on relaxation and precision, but we only get faster when we shift into a higher gear instead of simply pedaling faster. So set the metronome to quarter or even half notes and count consciously in these units. I'm not the first to recognize this principle, and I certainly did not come up with it on my own, but through suggestions from teachers, from books and instructional videos. I'm certainly also influenced by Benny Greb, who worked out this whole principle nicely in his book The Language of Drumming. So if you're looking for a systematic approach on chunking and flow, you will find it here. And now to how you can use this principle to take your technique to a whole new level. To get the most out of this section, you should be at least rudimentarily familiar with the rudiments. This is a collection of short rhythms that make up the vocabulary of military marching drumming. There are a wide variety of them. Today I'm referring to the 40 rudiments of the Percussive Arts Society. Some of them are very simple. Some are quite complex and are therefore very often taken as exercises for hand technique. Some people consider the rudiments to be outdated, others still see them as the basic vocabulary of drumming. I think they're pretty great and they've enriched my playing immensely, but there is one thing that many people misunderstand about the rudiments and therefore practice and use them in a way that is useless if they want to improve their technique. I even wanted to call this video "What Many People Misunderstand About the Rudiments" at first, because here I first noticed the problem with playing from note to note. The mistake is to see them as pure exercises for right-left coordination and to try to play them faster and faster stroke by stroke. But the real, irreplaceable value of the rudiments lies elsewhere. If we understand their internal structure, we can use them to improve our technique and efficiency immensely and thus play them much faster. I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. To do this, we quickly have to go through the repertoire of basic hand techniques beforehand. This repertoire, apart from some special techniques such as push-pull, which are only there to play single strokes faster, consists of 3 families: the basic strokes, the molar strokes and the double strokes. The basic strokes are the so-called full stroke, a powerful stroke that ends in the starting position. And the tap notes, simple strokes from the wrist at medium or low volume. For faster strokes and as preparation for the double strokes, I would also include finger technique, also called finger control, continuous strokes that only come from the fingers. Secondly, the molar technique and its components. For this we also need the downstroke, which is played like a whipping motion, like a wave that runs through the arm. And the upstroke, which is passive, created by the wind-up motion in form of a quick but supple upward flick of the wrist. If we combine them now, we have 4 options. We can play upstroke and downstroke one after the other. This way we can quickly and efficiently move from a quiet note to a loud one. Secondly, we can omit the rest in between and play both directly in alternation. This means that we always have an accented and a soft note of the same length. Many people do this, often intuitively, on the right of the hi-hat. Thirdly, we can combine the downstroke with the tap notes, preferably as controlled rebounds. That means you just let the stick keep bouncing without making active strokes. How fast these beats are is influenced by your back fingers. They are loose but elastic and act as a kind of spring. The wider and more relaxed, the longer. The tighter and firmer, the faster the strokes. But all happens passively. With a little practice you can create 2, 3 or even 4 strokes of the same length. Nothing is as efficient as that, so be sure to practice it extensively. We will use it a lot in a moment. And fourthly, you add the upstroke to this combination. This results in the classic molar pumping motion. You only do 1 downstroke, but create a sequence of 3, 4 or even more consecutive notes with an accent at the beginning. Attention, this will only feel and sound fluidly if you don't perceive the notes as separate. The movements overlap. It's like a wave running through your arm. While the wrist has not even reached the top in the upstroke, the downward movement already begins in the elbow. And last but not least, we need the double strokes. You play 2 strokes per hand. While one plays, the other can wind up. Here you can also easily use controlled rebounds. But if you want the notes to be clearly articulated, all equally loud, then you should support the second stroke from your fingers. You definitely have to practice that slowly and precisely. These are all the techniques you need. You should have understood the principles and be able to implement them all at least fundamentally. In order to improve them and above all to be able to apply them flexibly, we are now taking on the rudiments. And what we want to try to do is to find the most efficient way to play these patterns. To do this, we practice the rudiment until we play it by heart and it runs all by itself at a medium tempo. Then we switch with one hand to a surface that is as silent as possible. So we reveal the role of the individual hand within the rudiment. On the one hand, it is always helpful to understand which subrhythms make up the final result, but above all, we now want to see how we can make it more fluid from a technical point of view. So, what sequences of loud and soft strokes do we have, and which of the techniques from our arsenal can we apply? An example, the flam taps, rudiment number 22. We play double strokes, with the first one being both emphasized and having a grace note. We want to play these as softly as possible, as ghost notes. If we now look at the hands individually, this rhythm results. We play loud, medium, soft. And now remember what I said before. Start with the end in mind. If we want to play something fast, we have to practice in the same way we would eventually do it quickly, but in slow motion. What technique can we use to play loud, medium, soft ergonomically? I would say we do a downstroke and then 2 controlled rebounds, which automatically become softer because the kinetic energy decreases. But we also want to be up early enough for the next downstroke. So you could play the third note as an upstroke, which is also quiet because it is passive. This is the movement that results. That's the Möller pumping motion, but with a pause before the downstroke. So practice this movement with each hand individually until it is internalized and put it back together. It's much easier that way than if we play every stroke deliberately. Because we took the time to take the rhythm apart, we solved the puzzle and can also play this rudiment much faster. There is not always such a pleasant solution. In the inverted flam taps, rudiment 29, the hands play soft, medium, loud. This is much more difficult. But here too, it is worthwhile to practice this with each hand individually. Because if we understand how the whole thing is structured, how the right and the left hand have to work together to produce the result, we keep the big picture in view. Even if we zero in on one hand like this, we see it in context. We think and practice again in larger units, namely in sequences of movements. This is especially important for the rudiments where the interaction of the hands must be finely tuned because they are not symmetrical, for example, the flamme Q. It's only when you unravel it that you notice that one hand is simply playing 3 tap notes with equal spacing. You can play it in a more relaxed way because you can take this hand as a rhythmic guide and focus technically on the other. And that's what I mean by movement puzzles. If we set ourselves the goal of playing any rudiment from a single source, the respective movements of the hands must be considered in the same way. This is possible with the techniques mentioned. So you don't have to master the techniques completely before, but this task requires you to find the most efficient way. Since it is your own journey of discovery, you will acquire the most economical path for yourself. This way you are much more likely to internalize the technique. You see a purpose in it because you need it to solve the puzzle. In the end, with the rudiments, you have gained a whole arsenal of rhythms and phrases on the one hand and techniques on the other. Using them creatively in your playing on the whole kit then works much easier and more naturally. For longer rudiments, chunking becomes even more important. For example, the triple paradiddle. It consists of 16 strokes. But if I think right, left, right, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, left, I don't get very far. Better, 6 single strokes and 1 double stroke, starting each once with the left and with the right hand. This way I have already relieved my head because I have switched from many small to a few larger units of information. And at some point you just focus on the fact that there is an accent every 8 beats, always alternating left and right. So we move even higher to the level of the beat. Play fast and count slowly. Admittedly, playing the individual hands fluently in this rudiment is particularly difficult, also rhythmically. For this, we have to go briefly to the level of note by note, but the understanding and security that you gain from this are irreplaceable. An important note: in order to really master the rudiments and techniques, you should vary them. I already said in my last video about dynamics, what good is a technique that we can only play at one volume? So practice them in different dynamics, as stick and technique, this flexible interface, behave differently. And also practice them on surfaces with a poor rebound. A quick example: the single paradiddle, rudiment 16. It can also be played on the pad as a downstroke, 2 controlled rebounds and an upstroke. Not only that, physics actually facilitates this. Since the rebound after the accent is strong, there is a natural pause before the 2 tap notes, and during the double stroke the other hand has time to switch from the upstroke to the downstroke. So here again, focus on the rhythm and a fluid arm movement, and then let the strokes in between occur as naturally as possible. So fast paradiddles work almost by themselves. But on a low-tuned floor tom, it looks quite different. Because the bigger the drum, the harder we have to hit it to produce the same volume. This, coupled with the fact that the rebound is significantly worse, leads to the problem that we can't just let the stick bounce passively without it sounding too quiet and undefined. So here we have to actively support the upstroke and really play out the double stroke. To do this, we need to get the hand back up quickly after the accent, so we don't play it as a downstroke, but as a full stroke. So, if you practice each rudiment in different dynamics and with different rebounds, you will confront your hands with a whole range of tasks to solve. This will improve your technical flexibility and thus your musical freedom if you aim for clear articulation coupled with efficiency and relaxation. So the rudiments are still very relevant today, not as a vocabulary of drumming, but as an incentive to optimize the technique. It can be a lot of fun to see them this way, as a puzzle, as a game. Find the right key, the right technique to solve them. Trust in your body. Look more at the principle of how the stick would have to behave in order to play it fluently. The coordination of the many muscles involved works by itself and is highly efficient if we look at the goal and do not prescribe our body how to move. So it's not about having the right theory of movement efficiency or even just practicing the right technique. If I teach a student a technique in a private lesson, it doesn't help to explain it or even show it to them. I have to give the right task so that they work it out for themselves. In this way, they will understand the purpose on the one hand and find the best way to implement it on the other. And this is exactly the process you will go through when you see the rudiments and other exercises as movement puzzles and work out the most fluid way to solve them yourself. In order to play more fluently, it is already half the battle to think and play in larger units, rhythms as words and phrases, techniques as sequences of movements. But if we just line them up now, it may still be that it sounds jolty. The last step is to leave the chunks behind as a mnemonic and take the beat of the music and your own counting as orientation. Depending on the exercise or song, depending on the tempo, you have a different point of reference. This can be the backbeat, the clave, or the one in each bar. It is worth finding out on which beats a groove or song breathes. Absorb this feeling and let it move you. This is the highest level, the melody, the pulse of the music. There is something meditative about it. You float above things. You yourself only pay attention to this breathing, and your hands and feet play what they have previously practiced on the lower levels all by themselves. That is the goal. When you play like this, even slight fluctuations in tempo are not a problem because they are fluid. Nobody plays perfectly, and that's not the goal. But jumps or gaps, no matter how small, are much more noticeable and give your playing an uncomfortable feeling. Aim for keeping the tempo by stretching or compressing the rhythms related to the pulse if necessary. If you never lose your pulse, your body will take care of it on its own. All in all, this results in an even flow of notes, and the small adjustments are not noticeable, or rather only you notice them, because as you work on precision in playing, the precision of your hearing also improves. So don't despair. As you get better, you set the bar higher as well. What is essential for this is counting while practicing and playing. Counting out loud. Everything else is self-deception. Make your inner pulse audible and then play to yourself, not just to a metronome. Why this is so important and what tips I would give you for it, I have explained in detail in another video. You can find the link here and in the description. Just this much here, your voice guides you through the different levels. If we take apart a rhythm note by note, we count out each note. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4. When we use chunking, we also make that clear through the voice and count the next larger note value. And 3 and 4 and 1. Then the next, and at the end we count or sing the pulse or melody of the song. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. You should have them in mind from the beginning, and then, even when practicing slowly, zoom out every now and then and look at the big picture to see if you're still on the right track. It takes courage to leave the level of individual notes. We think practicing means controlling things. But effective learning works in such a way that we send the right signals to our body and our subconscious. We have to confront them with the right tasks, and they will find the solution themselves. And it will be very efficient, especially in terms of technique. Our body finds the most economical way if we don't interfere with it through overambitious micromanagement. Instead, we want to imagine how it should sound, look, feel in the end. Harmonious, relaxed, natural. Technique is a means to an end to achieve this. So we should practice it in a natural, relaxed and harmonious way. This means that when we practice slowly to familiarize ourselves with something, we play it in slow motion to anticipate the flow and count in larger note values as early as possible. Because we have to make one thing clear. If we don't do that and divide things into separated units, we are practicing something completely different and not what is actually our goal. If I pronounce the word slowly by breaking it down into I-N-D-I-V-I-D-U-A-L letters, it loses its flow and, most of all, its meaning. So we want to form musical words, maybe even combine them into even bigger phrases, but not divide them. Therefore, the principle of chunking also helps a lot when playing odd time signatures. Maybe I'll make a video about that someday as well. But first, it's your turn. I remind you again, imagine this was a lesson. How much would you have paid for it? Use the link in the description and donate this amount. Only with your support can I continue to run this channel and make new videos. Thank you for your honesty. Or you can join my Patreon page and get even more bonus material like exclusive videos, articles, essays and a big workshop once a year exclusively for all my patrons. If you want to see more videos about efficient practicing, personal development and drumming, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and bye bye.